Inside Washington's Museum of the Bible, a single volume that is like no other. The so-called Slave Bible, remarkable not for what's in it, but for what's not.
So about 90% of the Old Testament's been removed and about 50% of the New Testament's been removed. To put it another way, a normal King James Version has 1,189 chapters in it. The Slave Bible has only 232.
Missing are chapters and verses that might have encouraged uprisings. Book of Exodus, redacted. No story of Moses demanding Pharaoh, "Let my people go." Gone is Galatians, and the verse, "There is neither bond nor free, for ye are all one in Christ Jesus." And no Jeremiah, "Woe unto him that useth his neighbor's service without wages."
What they've left in are verses such as Ephesians 6:5, which is the famous verse, "Slaves, be obedient to your master."
Looking at this Bible, it's hard to tell that anything's been taken out of it.
That's correct. I mean, it looks like a normal book. For many enslaved Africans, this would have been the first time they were exposed to the Bible.
A Bible selectively edited to instill obedience, using religion to underpin the horror of slavery. When people encounter this exhibit, what lasting impression do you want them to leave with?
But we want to pass the message on that may this never happen again. The Bible itself is a whole book. It's not one that you get to carve up and use this piece or that piece.
The Slave Bible designed to repress rebellion, but it didn't work. Enslaved people in the Caribbean constantly fought against slavery until emancipation.
I think it's very relevant to understand our history, not just American history, but our African American history, our roots and how we got to this point.
A dark chapter in the history of the good book.
Mayor?
Yes.
How are you getting along?
Fine, Mr. President. Wonderful. Thank you very much. How are you?
Oh, fine. Are you getting any rest this hot summer?
No, we're not, because we have racial problems here, and I spend about 24 hours a day among them, and that's the only way to keep them quiet. I get insulted, but I don't let them insult me. We just keep on moving.
Goodness. What percentage of Baltimore is Negro?
60% in our schools and 40% whites in the schools, 60% Negroes, and the opposite is just in the 60% whites and 40% Negro population. But they're concentrated, you see, all around the core of the city. We're building a beautiful city right here in the business area, but all around us we have bad conditions.
Could I talk to you on something very personal to me, and that in the strictest of confidence?
Yes, indeed.
I don't want anybody to know it but me and you. I just might have to urge you to come over here and help run Washington for us.
Well, I'd like to think about it for a minute or two.
We have 60% Negroes. We also ought to have some young, able, attractive Negro in the administration. We under this new reorganization, I told him I was going to get the best man in America to run the city. I rather think that I'm going to have to ask you to do that, and I would like to take a young, able, some fellow that could stand some training that was a Negro and put him in as an assistant and let you try to train him to see how it worked out, see if he could ever take the thing over when you got to where you felt up to it. But I'm just afraid I'm going to have to ask it, and it's a lot better assignment than Vietnam, although it's not a very good one.
Yes, could I think it over and talk with some people here?
That could give you fringe benefits, or you could go out on a boat, take some people now and then, and try to ease some tensions and the sports and things of that kind. What's your salary over there?
$25,000.
Well, you can get about the same here. Get $28,500. I know you don't like the thought of undertaking a heavy thing and a new thing, but I just think the next year or so you just got to do this. I just don't think, I think we got to draft you. I don't think you got any choice.
All right, let me, I have to talk it over naturally with my wife.
I think we ought to have a Negro somewhere in the chain of command, and I think he could carry out your instruction. He could carry out your instruction. He could carry out your instruction.
All right, I'll call you.
If you don't, I'm going to send you to Nang.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. I'll call you. Bye.
It's you liberals who have lifted them up, Howard.
Paul, you conservatives make a mistake. You can't afford to strangle hope in people. Without hope, people become dangerous.
No, Howard, you liberals have let them invade our society. You give them jobs, Political job.
Oh, you missed the point. It's only the smart ones we move up.
That makes it even worse.
No, we have to move them up. If we leave a smart one in the ghetto, he might develop into a leader against us. But if we raise him up into white society, we neutralize him. He feels compelled to try to act like us. He loses his identity and his racial anger, if he has any. He becomes alien to his brothers. They realize he sold them out and they grow to hate him. He becomes worthless to them and safe for us. No, thank you. In fact, in his love for the creature comforts, except for his color, he's become one of us.
The political psychology of Black consciousness. Sociopathology precedes psychopathology. Collective pathology precedes individual pathology. That is, diseased social interactions between groups generate diseased social interactions within groups. And furthermore, diseased social interactions within groups generate diseased psychological interactions within individuals who are their constituents. The discontents of individuals reflect the discontents of groups, and these the discontents of societies and cultures they constitute. The great chain of discontents inextricably binds together individual, group, society, and culture. The character and conduct of groups and individuals, however labeled and characterized, whether judged to be good or evil, superior or inferior, are the products of historic intergroup, intragroup, and interpersonal relations, and can only be meaningfully understood in terms of these relations. The character and behavior of African American individuals, whether labeled normal or abnormal, can only be fully and accurately comprehended along with the process and purpose of labeling itself in terms of the historic power relations between dominant European American and subordinate African American groups. White domination and Black subordination involve special types of social power relations constructed predominantly by whites in order that they might receive certain material and non-material benefits thereby. These social power relations involve social practices and processes which mediate the white American socioeconomic, sociopolitical, socio-psychological manipulation and construction of Black consciousness and behavior. Under white supremacy, Black consciousness and behavior are socially manufactured, labeled, and judged by whites in ways constant with their social control and expropriation of Black natural and acquired human resources. The normality or abnormality of Black consciousness and behavior are so classified with reference to the degree to which they support or oppose to the continuity of white supremacy. Normal Black consciousness and behavior under the various regimes of white domination are characterized by habitual thought patterns and behavioral tendencies, which render them pliable to white authoritarian and authoritative social control with minimal resistance, which induce Blacks to accept their subordinate status as natural, perhaps actually to misperceive their opposite as freedom. Abnormal Black consciousness and behavior under white supremacy involve habitual thought patterns and behavioral tendencies in Blacks, which make their social control by whites intolerably difficult or ineffective, which induces them to protest, resist, and reject their subordinate status as destined or natural, to perceive their opposition as unfreedom. Welcome back. Happy Monday. Welcome back to On the Shoulders of Giants. I am Joseph Ward, continuing my reading of Dr. Amos Wilson's The Falsification of African Consciousness, Eurocentric History, Psychiatry, and the Politics of White Supremacy. And I started my reading on page 101 in part 3, which is the last part, The Political Psychology of Black Consciousness. As you can see from the clips that I showed and from what I just read, we're talking about how the consciousness of Black Americans was shaped, whether that consciousness is labeled normal or abnormal, the safe Negro versus the unsafe Negro, the house Negro versus the field Negro mindset. But before we get deep into it, make sure to like this video, comment, and subscribe. Make sure you share this video to as many people as possible. We want to make sure that our people understand what's going on with us and what happened to us. And if you want to support On the Shoulders of Giants, you can see it scrolling at the bottom of the screen. And there are also links in the description to support us. Remember, when you support On the Shoulders of Giants, you support children within my community that I'm educating through my Black History School to make sure that they have the information and the resources and the opportunities that they need to be their greatest Black selves. So thank you all for your support. Thank you all for the views. And let's get back into it, right? So shaping the mindsets of your slaves. We're talking about I love the title because we're talking about the political psychology of Black consciousness, the political psychology, right? Now, remember, Neely Fuller told us that all human interactions is politics. Human interactions, period, on this base level is politics. All human interactions is political. But now we're talking about politics in terms of domination and subordination. Politics in terms of one group being able to fully control the minds and the actions and the behaviors of a whole nother group, of a group that they have subordinated, of a group that have dominated. And now the group of people, us who were dominated, trying to understand or using this information to better understand how our minds were constructed so we can deconstruct our minds and then reconstruct our minds into a more favorable mindset or more Africanized mindset that will be more conducive for our freedom, true liberation, and true separation, being able to be an autonomous, self-sustained group of people, which I know we're capable of, because look at how great we are fractured. Look at the potential that we have in our fractured state. So if we was to ever come together, bring everything together, we will be very powerful. I know it would be very powerful. But the thing is, this being realistic, right now where we are, it looks bleak. It looks bleak, but that's what better understanding of the how and when, because it's for us, it's not, it's who and what and where and when and all those different things. And we need to know the why of our mindsets. Why do Black people behave the way we behave? Why are we fractured? Why do we refuse to come together? Why do we look at each other as enemies? Why don't we trust each other? Why do we trust white people or any other group of non-Black American people more than we trust ourselves? It's because of the political psychology that was placed upon us. Black consciousness was shaped by our oppressors. I think it's Thomas Sowell writes about it a bit, and Thomas Sowell doesn't really get deep into it, but he writes about how the influences of Southern whites, the cultural influences that Southern whites had on Black people in America, because, you know, it was the majority of Black people was in the South. So that is a piece of it, but it's not the whole truth, right? That is a piece, because we didn't get all of our cultural cues from Southern white Americans. We have some, but when we're talking about the shaping of the mindset of your slaves, now we can get more into the conversation of what impact or what effects or different attributes that were poured into our mentality by the whites that were around us and the whites that were controlling us, right? The object is to make sure that the slave remains a slave. So if you do it properly enough, if you train the slave properly enough, you can take the shackles off of them. You can take the shackles off of the slave's hands. You can take the shackles off of the slave's feet. You don't have to worry about that slave fighting back, because now all of the actions that the slave gives will be to support and uplift the system of white supremacy. And anything that deviates from that mindset will be deemed as abnormal or deviant. And those mindsets need to be put down. Those mindsets need to be quelled. But we need more of the radical, deviant, abnormal mindsets, because that means we're more in our right minds. The more white people tell us that we're out of our minds, the closer we may be to being in our right minds. But remember, the overall outcomes is what matter. What are we doing for ourselves to get the favorable outcomes that we need to advance ourselves forward? That's the truth is in that. The truth is in what comes out of our actual actions. But let me stop talking. Let me get back to reading. And remember, open your mind up so we can really learn the finer points of what they did to us mentally so we can better reverse what happened. So I'm picking up on page 102, the second to last paragraph in 102. From the vantage point of the continuity of white supremacy, the basis for the labeling of Black consciousness and behavior by whites as normal or abnormal depends not on the discovery by whites of discrete states of consciousness and their correlated behavioral tendencies in Blacks, but on the discovery of the degree to which Black consciousness behavioral tendencies are perceived as serving or disserving their hegemonic interest, right? What is the behavior patterns that we have? Is it helping us or is it hurting us? Is it helping us move forward or is it helping us slide backwards? Are we backsliding out here? Right? Disturbances of thought, emotions, motivational and value priorities, and psychological processes in Blacks are the unavoidable outcomes of their oppression by whites. To be oppressed is by definition to have one's thought processes disturbed, emotions impaired, motives and values inverted, and one's body functions imbalanced. There can be no normality of consciousness and conduct for Blacks as long as they remain dominated by whites. Merely socially acceptable or unacceptable adjustments to the ever-changing demand characteristics of white supremacy. The normality of Blacks under white domination is by the circumstance above all pathological normalcy, disturbances in Black consciousness and behavior which are deemed serviceable and beneficial to the needs of their white oppressors. The alleged normality or abnormality of Black consciousness under white supremacy requires that Blacks involuntarily and obsessively deceive themselves. This collective self-deception, which is the benchmark of oppressed Black consciousness, is the main product of white-Black social power relations motivated by anxiety and ignorance, founded on the denial and distortion of reality. Both the normality and abnormality of Black consciousness and behavior, as reproduced by the power relations of white supremacy, also require that they operate against their own best interest in the interest of their white oppressors, that they be self-denying, self-defeating, and oftentimes self-destructing while convincing themselves that the opposite is true. And that's where we are now, making every excuse of why abnormal, maladjusted, hood, ratchet behavior is normal behavior. They just being themselves. Yeah, and that may be true. They are being themselves, but unfortunately, themselves is a degraded version of Blackness that is unhealthy. And that behavior needs to be eliminated, not the person, but the behavior. We need to change their programming. That person needs new programming. That person needs to be around something and see around something and soak up something new. Because what we don't need is destructive behavior being propped up. But unfortunately, that's where we are. Like degrading behavior being propped up. Every excuse is in the book. As a matter of fact, I had a debate with two college girls this past Friday about the way they dress. And I was giving them the perspective of not just a man, but an older man who was once in this college atmosphere and once indulged in degrading behavior patterns as a young person. But when I got around older people who knew better, my programming began to change in college as a young person, right? So getting them to understand. So we're talking about the way the young women are dressed and the way the young men are dressed. The young men dress like thugs and gangsters, and the young girls dress like streetwalkers. And it's fun, it's cool, it's relaxing, it's the trend. It's what we want to do when we let our hair down. Yeah, but I can't tell the difference between you and the streetwalker. But the idea that these 24-year-old young girls that I'm talking to, they're 24. They're 24 years old, and already branded in their minds is, this is an acceptable way for me to present myself to the world with all of my hind parts and inside parts hanging out. All of my holes are just hanging out. The young men walk around looking like they ain't bathed in 3 days, looking like they just want to hang out. It looked like they came to college to learn how to hang on the corner and walk the streets. That's because the degrading behavior patterns have been romanticized through the TV, through the movies, through the videos, just in the ways of life. Being hood is black now. So the behavior which should be abnormal is seen as normal, and the behavior that is seen as normal is seen as abnormal, because white supremacy want all of us to have that Negro mindset. Normality is as much a political economic concept as a psychological social concept. As a political economic concept, it is the result in large part of the interplay of intergroup, intragroup, and primary group social economic power relations and practices, which have been exercised by the bodies of persons. Normality is born of fairly systematic methods of rewarding and punishing behavior, ritual practices, and indoctrination, training, correction, supervision, and constraint. As societies change, so do their fields of power relations, methods, and socialization, and concepts of normalcy. To paraphrase Foucault, the normality which inhabits a person and brings him into existence is itself a factor of the mystery that is in fact the factor in the mastery that those in power exercise over the person's consciousness and behavior. Normality as a functional state of being, as a circumscribed set of statutes, normality as a functional state of being, as a circumscribed set of states and states of consciousness and their correlational behavior tendencies, is the effect of the instrument of dynamic political economic relations. The norm is in essence a principle of coercion, a constraint on behavior, a rule to be followed. It involves the establishment of a set of values or standards, a range of behaviors to be respected, which must be achieved through conformity, reinforced by social sanctions, rewards, and punishments. Normalization, the process of using the values of the norm to compare, differentiate, hierarchize, homogenize, and determine the level and value of abilities and the nature of persons and groups, to exclude, to mark the frontier of the abnormal, and thereby retain power, privilege, and favor, is one of the greatest instruments of power wielded by those who rule and dominate others. Hence, under white supremacy, the normality of blacks is to a significant extent both the effect and the instrument of white power. For the subordinated African, normality is the prison of his mind and body. To be normal, to act normal, to be considered normal in white society is to follow the rules, to follow the status quo, to make sure the status quo remains, to be the house Negro, the bougie, the boule, the elite, the go along, get along gang, the fall in line boys and girls. This is the way white supremacy says we must exist, so we must exist, because when you're in that mindset, they want to win. They want to be perceived as valuable. They want to be perceived as valuable to white supremacy because they see the value in white supremacy for their individual selves. The individualistic mindset is also a product of the European reconstructing of our minds. African people are more collective and more societal. African people, we have our cultural, the way our culture flows and dictates, we think about the whole, not the individual. So when you see a group of Black people who are individualistic, it's a great chance that they've been colonized. Their minds have been colonized. Their bodies have been colonized. Their thoughts have been colonized. Their actions are colonized. Everything that they do is to gain the favor of the white supremacists, but they don't understand how they are further distorting, degrading themselves, making it harder for themselves to actually be normal. And normal in the sense of you're not robotic. You're not an automaton. Your mind is not focused on this white acceptance. Your mind is focused on Black health, Black liberation, Black existence, Black people being empowered, Black people growing, Black people coming together. You see, like Dr. Amos stated, when you think about empowering yourself, improving yourself, making sure that you and your people can grow, making sure that you and your people can rise, making sure that you and your people are better. When you're looking for power, when you're looking for, because we don't want equality, we want power. Let's stop asking for equality. Let's just stop asking for equality. We want power. So let's stop beating around the bush. We want power, but we will never get there with the way we think. That's the beauty of the system of white supremacy, and that's the beauty of how they shaped our minds. They shaped our minds to look at us looking to be free as a bad thing. That drapetomania, that Stockholm syndrome. Something has to be wrong with you if you want to get away from the plantation. It hasn't changed. Remember, it hasn't changed much. The chains were removed from our bodies, but they were never removed from our minds. Drapetomania, you are insane for wanting to be free from your master. Your freedom uppity Negro behavior is not good, because it may inspire the other Negroes to actually want to be free too. So we have to make sure we do everything to demonize your kind, so y'all won't infect the other Negroes and make them think that they need to be free too. Because the last thing we want is our Negroes thinking that they can be free out here in this world. How can white supremacy actually work? And how can white supremacy actually continue if Negroes feel free out here? I don't want my Negroes feeling free. I want my Negroes to understand their place, to stay in that place. I don't want nobody trying to run away. I don't want nobody trying to come together. I don't want no collective thoughts. I don't want no empowerment. I want them to look at their Blackness and see that their Blackness is the filthiest thing that they've ever seen in the world. I want them to look at themselves in the mirror and want to see me. This is the mindset of the people who constructed our minds. Let's get back into the reading. The authority to label consciousness and behavior reflects social power inequalities between the labelers and the labeled. Therefore, the authority to label an essential factor in the processes of social power and often functions to maintain or increase power inequalities. Labeling behavior as normal or abnormal may contribute to maintaining or enhancing prevailing power inequalities, in that by directing attention to their purported intrapsychic, subcultural, or genetic sources, the casual relevance of other social, political, economic phenomena, and generating and maintaining such behavior are downplayed, dismissed, or obscured. Labeling and defining behavior is a part of a power relating process in which certain segments of a society are granted exclusive legitimacy to power to explain, diagnose, and treat certain states of consciousness and forms of behavior not granted to others. The process of granting such exclusive rights may be referred to as granting of authority to the recipient person or group based on custom, competence, other legal proceedings, or codes. The authority is granted a socially acknowledged right to command the compliance of others under specified circumstances. Now we're talking about cherry picking, right? Cherry picking. And these are the Negroes that they cherry pick, because these Negroes will be the mouthpiece to say, hey, if I made it, why can't you make it? Look at me. Look at the other Negroes like me. If we made it, why can't you make it? Without giving full context that they chose to sell their souls to their masters. So in the system of white supremacy that thrives on white domination, black subordination, and black labor, you think that because you worked hard, that white people are going to reward you for your hard work, as if your hard work is any different from any other people's hard work. It irks my soul when these motivational speakers and these other Negroes who are out here who've found their comforting place in white supremacy, Thomas Sowell and Larry Elder and all these other Negroes, because these are the Negroes we're reading about, right? Their thing is, well, I picked myself up from my bootstraps. No, Negro, you made the deal to sell your soul to your slave master. How is your hard work any different from anybody else's hard work? I see people working hard all day, every day. I see people busting their butts, black people busting their butts all day, every day. And you do too. We all see hardworking black people every day that don't get the same opportunities as other Negroes because they're not willing to sell their souls to their slave masters. There's a difference. Authority is not merely ascribed or granted to a particular person or social group in a society for pragmatic reasons alone. The social and political ascription or granting of authority is usually rationalized or legitimized in terms of an undying ideology. Once the ideology which rationalizes and legitimizes a particular authority structure gains general social acceptance and the political approbation of the ruling regime, it not only tends to delegitimize alternative or opposing ideologies, but also tends to empower and legitimate the ruling regime along with those who control its operational apparatus. This may occur in spite of the rather obvious failure of the ideology and the authority structure it legitimates to adequately explain, resolve, or significantly ameliorate the problems that they were ostensibly established to explain or resolve. So an example is the criminal justice or mental health establishments along with their legitimating ideology. So these establishments, they're using these processes, they're using these platforms that they have to either legitimize or delegitimize behaviors. To say this behavior is a good behavior, this behavior is a bad behavior. So now we're talking about the criminal justice system, hospitals, mental health hospitals, police, laws, all these different things, the politics that go into shaping a behavior, the politics that go into saying this is good behavior, this is bad behavior, all the politics behind it. But he's also talking about the power behind the politics to make these things stick. Like black people don't write the DSM, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual. We don't write that. The ruling power writes that. And they can put in and take out whatever they want. Remember, we're just talking about drapetomania. Drapetomania was literally created to say that a black person is insane for wanting to be free from slavery, free from bondage. Any black person that wants to be free from bondage is insane. So when a ruling regime, the white supremacist establishment, persists in maintaining an ideological authority structure and power in spite of its apparent dysfunctionality, i.e., as measured by its inability to resolve its assigned problems. One may infer from this the possibility that the ideological authority structure's real but obscure function may be primarily to help rationalize, legitimate, and maintain the ruling regime's social order and power relations. It archives these ends by attempting to define and resolve its assigned problems in ways to which do not indict the regime as its operational structure as the probable cause of the problems to begin with, because the presence of such problems may be utilized to actually help to justify, preserve, and empower the ruling regime. So it has to be reinforced. It has to be legitimized. It has to be supported. It has to be propped up. This behavior is dysfunctional. This behavior is functional. These black people over here behave the way they're supposed to behave. That's why you have the different organizations and things like the different boule groups that teach the kids how to, you know, the etiquette stuff that they teach the kids. And I don't like that. I never liked etiquette. I never, ever, ever in my life liked etiquette classes. Because my question was always, why is white European etiquette the etiquette out of all of the world? Because at a young age, I had an understanding that the world is bigger than what's around me, right? I had an understanding that there's Africa, there's Asia, there's Australia, there's islands all over the globe. There's various groups of people around this globe, around this world. Why is white European etiquette the standard for etiquette? It's to shape the minds of the oppressed to behave in a desired fashion. And this desired fashion will always go to the favor of the oppressors. You eat like this. You speak like this. You talk like this. You walk like this. You dress like this. How you do anything is how you do everything. Now we getting into it, right? Now you wonder why the motivational speaking is the way it is. Now you wonder why, or rather, now you see why the motivational speaking is the way it is. You see why the preaching is the way it is. You see why the instructing is the way it is. You see why the shaping of young black minds within the school systems are the way they are. Go to an HBCU and watch how many white minds get turned out of these HBCUs. All these predominantly black schools turn out so many black people with white minds because we go to HBCUs and learn how to think, walk, talk, behave, act like, and want to be white, depending on what classes you took and departments and who you came across. But for the most part, when we go to HBCUs, they ain't doing nothing but turning out black people in white masks. What's Frantz Fanon book? Black skin, white mask. Right? That's what's happening at these HBCUs. But that's what's happening within the system of white supremacy. When you thoroughly reshape the minds of the ones that you have oppressed, they're on autopilot. Now you can just release them. You can release them back in the world because they're on autopilot. You're going to have some deviants, but it's the reinforcement of the behavior to quell the deviants. And you shut down the insurrections and all those things. But the thing is to constantly reinforce the behavior patterns that support white supremacy. And when you constantly reinforce these behavior patterns over the generations, you're going to get more and more and more and more house Negroes. Domination and the mislabeling of behavior. Domination as a social fact and situation necessarily disorders and reorders the thoughts, feelings. Oh, you know what? Fuck it. Domination and the mislabeling of behavior. Domination as a social fact and situation necessarily disorders and reorders the thoughts, feelings, and emotions, motivations, and values, psychological states, and consequently the consciousness and behavior of the dominated. Thus, disordering and reordering of consciousness and behavior necessarily involve their politically functional labeling and classification by their instigators, classifying and labeling the consciousness and behavior of the oppressed by their oppressors provides the means by which the abnormality and pathology generated by oppression are normalized in the oppressed, i.e., made to appear to follow the natural order of the universe. The normalization of pathology is exquisitely functional for oppressive regimes. It is for this productive reason that oppressive white supremacy always attempts to rationalize its oppression of blacks by normalizing their reactionary, pathological, Eurocentric consciousness and behavior, and simultaneously abnormalizing both the reactionary and proactionary, non-pathological and pathological Afrocentric consciousness and behavior with regard to their political economic functionality for maintaining white dominance. In its attempt to normalize oppression, the oppressive white supremacist regime seeks to deceptively yet convincingly demonstrate that the model consciousness and behavior of subordinated Africans represent the spontaneous, natural, and normal products of original African character and culture. Thus, under white supremacy, the concept of the normal, abnormal, and pathological in human consciousness and behavior is relativized. The behavior is relativized, i.e., defined in terms of the degree to which they are or are not supportive of white domination. Is relative, right? We need the behaviors to support the ruling class. So to follow the cues of the white regime, to behave the way the white supremacists tell us to behave, is what God said do. It's what normal people do. It's what the people of the world do. Look at all the other people. Look at how they behave. But you know what? African people have always behaved like this. This is what you're supposed to behave like. Your behavior is supposed to be conducive to our oppression of you. And to behave in any other manner or any other fashion, it's abnormal. It's against what God said. It's against nature. It's against what will be beneficial for you in the long run. Because what's beneficial for us will be beneficial for you, right? That's what they're telling us. That's what they would say. That's the mindset, right? Teach the Negro that whiteness is the standard. Teach the Negro that whiteness is what you're supposed to be achieving. Your blackness is second class, third class, fourth class. You're only black because of the curses of your people. You're only black. But look at you. Look at your history. Look at what my people were able to do to your people. Look at your history. Look at your continent before we arrived. You African people achieved nothing before we arrived. And after whites arrived, after the Europeans arrived on your shores of Africa, look at all the wonders you have. Look at what the Arabs did for you in Egypt. Everybody gave the African civilization, and all we're trying to do is re-civilize you. It's re-civilize your minds here in America so you can live and thrive. Yeah, that's a whole lot of bull. Dr. Amos Wilson is teaching us that this is the rhetoric. This is what happened to us. This is how our minds got scrambled up. The reprogramming is imminent. It has to happen. So this part is the medicalization of African social problems. This is another method which they use to control us. A prime and relevant example of the construction of an ideological authority structure by a ruling regime, white supremacy, in order to maintain its social status quo, is the rapidly expanding medicalization of the deviant behavior example, or the criminality, academic problems of African Americans. That is, problems which may be accurately defined as a derivative of ethnic, social, political, economic, personal conflicts and dislocations are defined as derivative of biological malformations and imbalances, as comprehensively defined by Conrad in 1980. The medicalization or deviant or antisocial behavior refers to the defining and labeling of deviant behavior as a medical problem and illness, and mandating the medical profession to provide some type of treatment for it. Concomitant with this is the growing utilization of medicine as an agent of social control, typically as medical intervention, behavioral intervention, as social control seeks to limit, modify, regulate, isolate, and or eliminate socially defined deviant behavior with medical means and in the name of health. The medicalization of socially and politically deviant behavior as ideologically depoliticizes such behavior by denying its political origins and causally by refusing to consider its remediation and prevention through the implementation and appropriate political, economic, and social reconstructions. Through medicalization, deviant behavior is biologized, ethnicized, and geneticized. That is viewed as indicative of isolated individual aberrations of body and brain balances, or of inherited racial proclivities, genetic shortcomings, or deficiencies. The medicalization of many types of criminal, antisocial, deviant, and maladaptive behavior by Africans in America permits the ruling white supremacist regime to deny that its social, political, racist, and economic policies are practices are very significantly responsible for much of the occurrence of such behavior. Instead, the blame it passes on to the victims themselves by labeling them mentally ill, organically deficient, and in need of surveillance, detention, isolation, rehabilitation, behavior modification, and or medication, not of political, economic redresses. Even when social causation is allowed by the medical ideological authority structure, the causal chain usually begins and ends by blaming the patient's, clients, or deviant family, primary and peer groups relations, and subcultural particularities as the primary sources of his problems. Rarely is the overarching political, economic, cultural regime which significantly helps to determine the expressive character of those relations and particularities considered or critically analyzed. Moreover, the reigning therapeutic treatment approach may still be couched in medical terminology, executed in clinical institutional settings, and the patient's maladjustment alleviated by medicinal or ethnicized psychotherapy. Medicine, we're being drugged. We're being drugged in order to help produce a desired behavioral outcome because they want less deviant behavior. We can't have Negroes out here trying to run them up. You've seen in the last one, the first three clips, the last clip, when they were talking about removing the smart Negro from the masses because that smart Negro may cause the other Negroes to rise up. So remove that smart Negro and continue to reshape his mind. And at the same time, reshape the minds of the other masses of Negroes through other means. But the smart Negro is going to receive slightly different programming. It's going to be programming to keep them subordinate and subservient. But it's going to be a different programming because it's going to be a programming that has elements to allow them to be empowered and uplifted for the means of white supremacy, while the masses will learn to tear each other down. The masses will learn to be degrading. The masses will learn to stay on bottom. The masses will learn to romanticize and start to champion and praise the bad qualities. All the bad parts of their society will become seen as the good stuff, the stuff that they should praise, the stuff that they should want, the stuff that they should love and need. Look at who our kids look up to today. Look at who the adults look up to today. Look at how much dysfunction is happening. Look at how we are behaving amongst ourselves in this political climate. Black people are literally willing to stop talking to loved ones over political candidates that they've never met before. And neither party will do anything specific for Black people. But like they use the words, the crash outs. People are going to crash out for the Republicans and people are going to crash out for the Democrats. But what we refuse to crash out for is our liberation. Ain't that something? But that's because of the environment shaping that Negro mind. You Negroes think you know us. The Negroes think we know our oppressors. We really believe that we know our oppressors. We don't understand that our oppressors not only know us, they made us. They made our mindsets. They know how to control their Negroes because they gave us the mindsets that we have. We got to break these chains. We got to understand the falsification of African consciousness. So I read from page 101 to 108. And next week will be our last reading. And we're going to have to find our new book, which will go from 108 to 119. I'm not going to read the appendix. You can read the appendix on your own. Once again, if you don't have this book, the link is in the description for you to get your copy of the book. And you getting your copy of the book will also help support On the Shoulders of Giants with the Amazon Influencer Program. So 101 to 108. Make sure you get your read on. Make sure you get your copy of the book. Make sure you're caught up and you're on point. And next week gonna be the last video for this book, The Political Psychology of Black Consciousness. Let's understand what has happened to us and reverse that. Remember, like, comment, subscribe, share this. You can support me on Patreon. You can hit the super like button under this video. Comment, all those things. Make sure support. Other supporting links are in the description. See the Cash App scrolling at the bottom. Support me, please, please, please. Thank you. And we're going to continue doing what we're doing. Catch y'all next week.